Well, hello and welcome to episode 5 of Windows into Women's Ministry. My name is Carrie Sandom. I'm the Director of Women's Ministry at the Proclamation Trust in London. In this episode, I want us to think about how male leadership teams can enable women's ministry to flourish in their churches. Not every church can afford to employ a full-time women's worker, but that doesn't mean there can't be a vibrant women's ministry going on in the churches. But the senior pastor, the vicar, the staff team and the elders of the church have a vital role to play in enabling it to happen. So here are some top tips for male leadership teams to think about in order to enable women's ministry to flourish. First of all, you need to value women and commend the role they have in discipling other women. The senior pastor or vicar is key to this. If he commends women's ministry in a positive way, then the whole church will value the contribution women can make to the life of the local church. Actually, of course, the same is true for the children's ministry and the youth ministry and the ministry amongst seniors. If the senior pastor isn't heard to value these ministries, then the church family won't value them either. It's important to affirm women's ministry positively, not just in terms of what women cannot do, but rather in terms of what you really need them to do. If we understand and value the unique role women have in the teaching, training, and discipling of other women, then other people will value it too. Secondly, you need to decide what word ministry you want the women to do and then encourage them to do it. The Bible must be at the centre of women's ministry, as it should be for all the ministries of the church. This is because women's ministry is not about being a woman or a wife or a mother per se, and shouldn't be reduced to running a series of talks on identity, childlessness or contentment. Women's ministry is all about teaching the Bible to women where there is serious engagement with the text so that women grow in maturity and Christ-likeness. If you're a senior pastor or vicar, you will need to decide in what contexts you're happy for women to teach, whether one-to-one or in small group Bible studies. Would you encourage them to lead daytime groups for women, not just for young mums, but for women so there is a range of age and experience? Or evening groups for women who work full-time, as well as those married to non-Christian husbands? I know most evening groups would be mixed, and you will need to decide if you are happy for women to be involved in leading them. But having a few women-only groups is no bad thing, and stops the other groups being too female-dominated. Some men-only groups would also be a good idea. It doesn't matter what they study. They could follow the sermon series or study what all the other small groups are studying, but they should study whole books and, where possible, to write their own studies if they can. Maybe you can produce some notes for them. Over the years, I have often done that for women's Bible study group leaders because off-the-shelf Bible study resources are either too ambitious in what can be covered in a study or use the passage as a jumping-off point to other passages. Very few actually encourage people to look at the text and see what it says. I think there is a place for occasional events for women where the Bible is taught by a woman. Events that teach, train and disciple women are crucial if they are to grow in maturity and Christ-likeness. These might include evangelism training, learning a gospel outline, working through a Bible overview, or running a series of workshops encouraging women to develop good Bible handling skills. The Proclamation Trust runs a variety of workshops and day conferences encouraging women to handle the Bible well. Why not encourage some of the women in your church to come along and meet with other like-minded women? It's good to keep evangelism on the agenda and so run events that reach out to women. At my previous church, we used to run a range of different guest events. For example, a more social event like a toddler group picnic or an evening on parenting teens, where someone would be interviewed or give their testimony, but there was no formal gospel talk. Then a more formal event, like a summer bake-off or a Christmas craft fair, with a gospel talk, where women would be encouraged to join a Christianity Explored or something like it afterwards. By running a range of events over the year, women were encouraged to invite their friends to the event that was most appropriate for them. And yes, before you ask, the church also ran separate men's events from time to time, as well as events for both men and women together. I think there is a place also for encouraging women to go away together for a weekend and to study a book of the Bible or a section of a book together. Some churches I know would do this every year, and there would be an equivalent weekend away for men at a different time of year. It's a great opportunity to affirm women with Bible teaching gifts, to use them in an appropriate context. Training seminars and evening question times can also be a good way of deepening people's understanding, and meal times are always a highlight. Women love going away where someone else does the cooking and clearing up afterwards. It can be a challenge for the men who are left at home, but my boss always encouraged husbands to free up their wives so they could go on the women's weekend away. He then interviewed some of the women in the service the following Sunday to find out what they had been learning. These things may seem quite trivial, but they actually go a long way in promoting women's ministry so that everyone can see how valuable it is. And perhaps most important of all, that the senior pastor values it too. Thirdly, you need to understand that men and women do ministry differently. Now, there's a danger that we stereotype the differences unhelpfully, but I think it is true that men in our conservative evangelical constituency are often very task-focused and look for satisfaction from their work. And many women are more people-focused and look for satisfaction from their relationships. Now, there are exceptions to this. I've worked with one or two very relational men, but they are quite rare in our constituency. I've also worked with some very task-orientated women, but they are quite rare too. Now, your experience may be different to mine, but I think it is observably true that women often relate with women more quickly and at a deeper level than men do with other men. I think it's also observably true that women are not as resilient as men. They often do not have the same stamina and are less robust physically. I think men find it easier to switch off and tend to compartmentalize work, family, and friends very easily, whereas women find it harder to switch off and tend to think about these things all of the time. Now, these differences inevitably impact the way men and women do ministry. Ministry is often more emotionally draining for women than for men. One-to-one Bible studies often take longer for women than for men. I think women are more relationally intuitive than men. They can sense when a meeting has not gone well. And women need to talk in order to develop good relationships, and will often do a lot of their thinking out loud, whereas men don't need to talk so much and do most of their thinking internally. Men often want to offer solutions, but women don't always need solutions. They can usually work things out for themselves, but they do need to talk. Understanding these differences will help you to have realistic expectations of the men and women in your church, as together we seek to equip the saints for the work of ministry. Well, thank you for joining us for this short series looking at women's ministry in the local church. I hope it's been helpful for you as you think about how to teach women in your church, not just to be disciples of Jesus, but to be disciple-making disciples of Jesus. A vibrant women's ministry is such a blessing, not just to the women in the church, but to the whole church family. May the Lord bless you as you encourage the women in your church, not just to be passive consumers of other people's teaching ministry, but to be actively involved in it themselves.